This episode is brought to you by FX's Alien Earth, the official podcast. Each week, host Adam Rogers is joined by guests, including the show's creator, cast, and crew, in this exclusive companion podcast. They will explore story elements, deep dive into character motivations, and offer an episode-by-episode behind-the-scenes breakdown of each terrifying chapter in this new series. Search FX's Alien Earth wherever you listen to podcasts.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. With school out, summer is the perfect time to teach our kids real-world money skills they'll use forever. Greenlight is a debit card and the #1 family finance and safety app used by millions of families, helping kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. Parents can send their kids money and track their spending and saving, while kids build money confidence and skills in fun ways. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/Spotify. That's greenlight.com/Spotify.
Want to live better?
We got a lot of work to do.
Join Chris Hemsworth in National Geographic's new Disney Plus original series, Limitless. Live better now.
I'm diving headfirst into cutting-edge science to uncover 3 powerful secrets to living better right now. The growth that occurs through any challenging experience is really what we seek.
Chris Hemsworth stars in Limitless. Live better now. Now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu.
It's showtime.
This episode brought to you by MGM Plus. From executive producer Stephen King and an executive producer of Frog comes The Institute, a chilling new original series from MGM Plus. Kidnapped and trapped in a sinister facility, gifted teen Luke Ellis must join other children to fight for their survival. Starring Emmy Award winner Mary Louise Parker, Ben Barnes, and introducing Joe Freeman. The Institute. Watch now on MGM Plus. New episodes streaming Sundays.
Your earbud fell in a coffee cup. You need a taco pick-me-up. When modern life gets rough, grab the timeless taste you love. Paso, the old El Paso.
Hello, and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. We are so excited to bring you this show.
Our podcast is all about unraveling all of your favorite mysteries from the Assassin's Creed games. Each episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Assassin's Creed universe. From Pieces of Eden, solar flares, and the Isu, to the Hidden Ones, the Order of Ancients, and of course, the Animus. We will seek to uncover it all.
So join us, and maybe even take a leap of faith.
Hello and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. My name is Shelby. You also know me as She-Cup, and I am here with my co-host.
Yeah, so I am Austin or Teacup, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So we're back with another Assassin versus Templar, and this week is going to be a really interesting one. So I'm just going to turn it right over to Austin and let him introduce everything.
Yeah, so last episode we did, I believe, was Abraham Lincoln?
I think so. Caligula.
Yeah, so we were in the 1st century. Yeah, so the 1st century CE or AD, and so we're jumping all the way to the 19th century in England. So this is like it's around Victorian England, like this whole time, probably around near before the Civil War time. We're talking about Charles Darwin.
So we are in the Syndicate era.
We are in the Syndicate era, which this character does make an appearance in Syndicate. So we have some information that we can say about this person, but we will talk about whether we think that is accurate or not based on that. So Charles Darwin is one of those names that people probably know. Like when you see this, even if you had never played Assassin's Creed or done anything, or even weren't a huge student of history, you know Charles Darwin as the person who popularized the theory of evolution and natural selection, which is what he's most famous for. And so he is most famous in the field of evolutionary biology. His main theories that he says is the theory of natural selection, which is that the preferred qualities in nature are the ones that are going to survive. For example, if you have a species that has their source of food high up in a tree, evolution is going to favor, and natural selection is going to favor those who can climb and get to the top of that tree to get the food. That's the basic principle of natural selection. And then the other one is that we all come from a shared ancestor. And all of these combined create what we call the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution is very complicated, and I'm not going to get into like what that is. But I do think it is important to clarify, just for our listeners and things going on, that a theory in science is defined in relation to what is called a scientific law. It is not the same as like, oh, I have a theory or my headcanon theory about this. It is not the same. It is not just a guess. It is not just something like that. A theory is an observation of how or why something is the way it is. It is not the same as a scientific hypothesis, which is a hypothesis, which is the first step in what we call the scientific method, is an idea that a scientist may have or something they have observed, and they have a reason for the how or why that it comes in. It is the building blocks of a theory. A hypothesis becomes a theory only after it goes through rigorous and repeated, this is a big point, rigorous and repeated observation, measurement, and experimentation. So it has to be tested, and it has to be able to be repeated and get the same result when it tests again for it to become a theory. A scientific law, which is something different, is something that is measured and proven through empirical means. And these means like things like equations, or something that is like, okay, here, this isn't subjective. This is open to like the math says what the math says. And a great example of this is the law of gravity. It gives us a mathematical equation at which objects fall or are attracted to another larger object, i.e., Isaac Newton's apple and the earth. It falls at the same rate that we would fall if we jumped out of a plane. That's what the math and everything explains there. But this equation, this law of gravity, does not explain how gravity works. The theory of gravity, which talks about the magnetic pull of the earth and everything like that, explains how gravity works. And that's an important distinction, especially when we're talking about something that maybe not as much nowadays, but in the past, the theory of evolution has been very, very contentious in our own society, especially here in America, and just explaining like a scientific theory is not just a guess. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Darwin's life, because you can read books upon books upon books about it, and we would be here forever. And so similar to Lincoln and Tesla, I want to focus on Darwin's beliefs, what he believed deep down in his core, and things like that. And you might be surprised about some things. So, Shelby, the Darwins, the families, were nonconformist Unitarians. So if you don't know what that means, don't feel bad, because I knew what Unitarian meant, but I did not know what nonconformist meant, so I looked it up. These were people who rejected the governance of the Church of England. And I just want to say, from a religious history perspective, there have been nonconformists, or in different parts of history, they were called dissenters. These people have existed since the conception of the Church of England. Really, these people have existed since the conception of Christianity, just in different forms. But for the Church of England. Like, there have always been people who are like, no, the Church of England shouldn't be able to tell us what to do. No, the Church of England shouldn't be a state-funded church. Like, these people still very much exist in England today, of people who say, no, we shouldn't be funding the Church of England with our taxes and things like that. So that's kind of what the nonconformist. And then Unitarian is the opposite of Trinitarian. So Trinitarians believe in the doctrine of the Trinity. Unitarians do not believe in the doctrine of the Trinity. And I could explain that to you, but we need to save on time. So if you have questions, you can hit me up in the Discord about what that is. But basically, so Darwin, from early life and raised, is an outsider or going against the flow of what traditionalist society is going to say. Like, most people in England at this time are going to be pro-Church of England, and they're going to be Trinitarian. This puts Darwin, from the get-go, is on the outside with some of his belief systems. Also, in his early life, Darwin went to school to become an Anglican clergy person, which I found funny because he's Unitarian.
But did he? It's just that he grew up Unitarian.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he may have, if he was actually trying to become ordained in the Church of England, I would imagine that he would have to believe in the Trinity to do so.
Well, we know that he doesn't get ordained in the Church
do we
of
know
England.
why he doesn't get ordained?
I do not find why. I think he just got different interests and went a different path. But he did believe in a very literal and authoritarian view of the Bible. But hey, as I said, it's Victorian England. Most people who you would have encountered in that time would say or act like they have a very literal and authoritarian view of the Bible.
True, fair.
So after one of his journeys on the HMS Beagle, he returned with a very critical view of the historical accuracy of the Bible. Now, this is an important distinction. He is questioning the historical accuracy. At this point, he is not questioning faith or the existence of God, just the historical accuracy of the actual book that is the Bible. So you might not guess it because his work is so rooted in this like evolution versus creationism debate and like I don't believe in evolution versus this. But what Darwin says about religion has very little to do with creationism. In fact, Darwin firmly believes in most of his work, an ultimate lawgiver he talks about, or architect of creation. And so for most of his life, he believes in this higher power that is guiding all of this structure and laws and theories and things that he's observing in nature. And that's an important thing to note about Darwin, is that he is just talking about things that he observed on the Galapagos Islands. Like, he's just writing down and sharing what he observes. Other people take his work to conclusions.
Which I will say we see all the time in history.
Mm-hmm.
We see Calvinists do it to John Calvin. We see pretty much every follower of every dictator ever do it. That is not something unique to Darwin, but I think it is particularly painful for, probably not for Darwin, but just like given everything that he said, the way that sometimes his theories have been like misinterpreted or extrapolated, because like in America, at least, like we still have this conversation of whether or not evolution should be taught in schools. And in some places it is, in some places it's not. And we had a whole trial in our state about this very topic in the early 1900s. And so it's like the idea that Darwin was not anti-Christian is never considered. Like, it's just, oh, well, he wasn't a Christian, like he hates Christians and we shouldn't allow his stuff to be taught. But that's not true. He was clearly a believer in God of some kind. And sure, his theological beliefs may have changed over his life, is what it sounds like to me. But that doesn't make him an atheist, which is what I think a lot of people probably think about Darwin now.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that kind of at the end of his historical overview. But it also comes to a point of like, this is a little misconception that people have about religious history, especially the church. There is this conception that you have the scientists on one hand who are trying to like promote scientific theory and exploration, and then you have the church on the other hand who's like, no, anti-science, do that. But the church as an anti-science organization is a relatively new concept. Like, we have pockets of that, like Galileo, a little bit with Newton, like other things like that. But for, a lot of history, the church is the one who is funding and backing a lot of scientific developments throughout the history. So, like, that's a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, there are definitely points in history where the church has, suppressed scientific thought and have suppressed, like, advancement like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not a hard and fast rule. It is not always the case.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the church in certain denominations have always been pro-education. So to say that the church has always been anti that is not really accurate. As you've said, yes, there are some denominations, yes, there are some pockets that are anti-education, anti-science, but that is not everyone. And so clearly Darwin comes from a branch that is pro-education, pro-science, which allows him to do what he has done. But in our kind of narrative today, that is erased because it doesn't fit the narrative of what the church, quote unquote, is supposed to be.
Yes. So this is really, Darwin gets in trouble for evolution in a lot of ways, but he really gets in trouble for, one, questioning the historical accuracy of the Bible. And another, two, his main beef that he gets into is with a problem that in theology we call theodicy, which is a discipline known as theodicy. And so, Shelby, would you like to tell our listeners what theodicy is?
Yeah, so basically it's just the study of trying to understand why good things or why bad things happen to good people, trying to understand why a quote unquote good God would allow quote unquote bad things in the world, trying to understand why evil and a good God can coexist.
Yes, exactly. Or in another way, you could say it's the study of evil itself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big question in this time period for theologians right now, especially after the 18th century. In the middle of the 18th century, the 1700s, there's a huge earthquake in Lisbon, and it is devastating. And it really challenges this idea that, natural disasters happen because it's God's will. And that's really where Darwin gets in. This theory is still prevailing, the prevailing theory that the evils of the world, suffering, pain, starvation, and natural disasters, were ultimately good because they served a purpose in the greater good and ultimately led to the betterment of all of creation. This was the prevailing theory of why bad things happened at the time of Darwin. Darwin very much rejects this. He talks about a wasp that paralyzes bugs while they're still alive so that their young can feast on them when they hatch. And he says a kind of comment in here of like, I don't see how that is for the betterment of the world. Like, does the wasp actually have to inflict that much suffering on the bug to do that? Now, we can talk about a wasp does not have the same sense of agency that a human does to ask the question, is this right or is this wrong? They just do it. So these are the kind of questions that Darwin starts asking. And ultimately, like, this leads to a questioning of God's ultimate goodness in and of itself. And this is really what gets him in trouble with religious officials. It's this statement, not really his theories on evolution, but rather his questioning of the goodness of God that really get him in trouble. So in his late life, he continued to struggle with the problem of evil. He ultimately leaves the church altogether. So Darwin does leave Christianity. But he still, he holds on to this. He never really gets to the point of saying, oh, I believe in complete atheism. He says, I've never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of a God. I think that generally an agnostic would be the most correct description of my state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you don't know, agnostic means no knowledge. So it's basically saying I have no knowledge or evidence to say one way or the other.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that he has no knowledge or evidence to say one way or the other. It's more of like he's conflicted. He can't say for certain which way.
Yes.
Because he is a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, at some level, he does have knowledge. He does have evidence, but not enough to decide.
Right. That's a fair correction or clarification there. And I think that's the point of that. And I think Darwin holds on for a little bit because he needs some kind of like order to the chaos of the world. I mean, and we'll talk about this in beliefs, but like Darwin is alive during the height of the American Civil War. And Darwin is around in like a lot of conversations around the slave trade and slavery and racism. And we're going to talk about that after the mid-break about where he was on that. He sees a lot of evils in the world and he struggles to reconcile a good God with that. But he doesn't want to give it up entirely.
And I can understand that.
I can too.
So I think it sounds like now would be a good time for our mid-break.
Yeah.
All right.
Another switchback. Wait, this isn't the top. Where's the summit? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves
Almost there. You got this.
that we find only outside.
Wow. This is worth it.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
It's back to school season and Clorox is donating 2 million disinfecting wipes to classrooms across America. Because back to school means things can get a little bit messy. Just ask kindergarten teacher Miss Gibson.
Give me just one Clorox wipe and I'm ready for glitter glue, exploded lunchbox yogurt, peanut butter handprints, runny noses, picking noses, rubbing noses.
Touching noses.
Thank you, Edward. Ooh, nap mats and lockers and tissue boxes. And
Clorox
scissors.
disinfecting wipes. Teacher's #1 wipe. Clean feels good. Based on unit sales data.
Deborah had to have surgery.
I had hip surgery in November of 2024.
Her United Healthcare nurse, Crystal, checked on her.
We do a routine call after surgery, and I could tell that she was struggling.
Deborah needed help.
My infection markers were through the roof.
And Crystal knew what to do.
I called the hospital and said she's coming in.
And got Deborah the help she needed.
Crystal and United Healthcare saved my life.
Hear more stories like Deborah's at uhc.com. Benefits, features, and/or devices vary by plan area. Limitation and exclusions apply.
Ma cos'è? Shoot! Shoot a flying demon!
Quite a carriage you got there. Where did you buy it, if you don't mind me asking?
Ask all you want, Freddy. You'll never get an answer.
Damn it all. Was it my eyebrows?
Yes, and your face, voice, and body.
What have you done? We used them. They were not ready for firing. You could have gotten us all killed. Let me see. His breath is more fatal than our cannons. Only when you two fools are shooting them. There, try it.
The first thing we do in our mid-break is thank all of our amazing patrons. We love you all so much. You help us keep making the show. If you want to join the Patreon and come on our next patron chat, you can sign up at patreon.com/aclorecast. Check it out. There's all kinds of different tiers for you, and we do have some big updates coming in the next couple of months to next year's merch offerings. So stay tuned and sign up to be the first to know about those. And the next best way to support us is by leaving us a rating, a review, a Spotify comment, comments or reviews or whatever, wherever you can. You can also email us on our website, whatever you want to do, however you want to leave us kind words. We will read it out on a future episode of the show. And I don't have one to read today. So if you are thinking about leaving us a rating, leave us one and we'll probably get it on the next episode. So the next thing and final thing I have to shout out is our Discord server, which is an amazing place full of awesome gamers And we just have a lot of fun over there talking about all of our favorite games. So if you are looking for people to also share with fellow like-minded gamers, it's the place to be. So you definitely want to join it. And I think that's all we have in the mid-break. So let's get back into it.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast, brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today, available now on all major podcast platforms.
"16 years from today, Greg Gerstner will finally land the perfect cannonball. Epic splash. Unsuspecting friends. A work of art only possible because Greg is already meeting all these same people at AARP volunteer and community events that keep him active and involved and help make sure his happiness lives as long as he does. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/local.
Malaka. But that madman, the self-proclaimed Bishop of the Ruins, is our biggest critic. He calls our playing the devil's bagpipes.
I will sleep with anyone as long as they agree to be executed in the morning.
Like Xanthivis.
He was well satisfied with his bargain. Who is this toothsome fellow?
My queen, this is,
Well,
It is a generous offer, but I've already pledged my life to this woman.
Aya, you have chosen well.
All right, so we're back. So just a couple little bit more of Darwin's beliefs. Darwin was a staunch abolitionist, and very anti-slavery, and he advocated for electoral reform in the House of Commons, basically a movement to make the election process and the representation in the House of Commons to be better representative of the diversity of the people in England. Diversity among social class status, and in later works, race and ethnicity as well. So with that, Darwin also vehemently rejected the idea that there is any difference in the capacity for intelligence and feelings based on the idea of race or ethnicity. I'm going to read that again. Rejected the idea that there is any difference in the capacity for intelligence and feeling based on race or ethnicity. This is a very important belief of Darwin that is going to come up when it comes into how people take his work, even when he's alive. Darwin was intrigued by the argument that statistical analysis of heredity showed that moral and mental human traits could be inherited, and the principle of animal breeding could apply to humans. So he was intrigued by this idea, but in The Descent of Man, Darwin noted that aiding the weak to survive and families could lose the benefits of natural selection, but he strongly cautions that withholding such aid would endanger the instinct of sympathy, the noblest part of our nature, and factors such as education could be more important. And he was right. That's the look at what eugenics says, and even just the instinct of sympathy. Talking about Darwin did not believe in this cold, cruel world that's survival of the fittest, and if you're too weak, you get whatever. Eugenics says that intelligence is our preferred quality, and let's be honest, if you're white, that's also the preferred quality. Darwin says that sympathy, compassion, is our noblest of qualities that we need to look for.
And I do think that it is kind of crazy that he says this about sympathy when Darwinists coming after him have taken his his theories to such extremes, as you've said, of the survival of the fittest. Like, well, the smartest, most intelligent, strongest people are the ones that survive, when I think Darwin would argue no. I think that he would probably argue that the people who are most empathetic, the people who are able to build community with each other, are the ones that survive hardship.
Mm-hmm. And I think we see that in nature a lot. Like, look at dogs. Dogs are packed animals. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives.
Yeah.
And it's just this idea that we are communal creatures, that we survive better when we're together, when we care for one another. And Darwin observed that. He recorded that. He said, this is how this works. But Darwinists and social Darwinism and eugenics take that and say, oh no, we just need to be the most intelligent. And like, I think that we see the effects of that, even though not many people would say, yes, I subscribe to eugenics, but like, there's this constant race of, oh, we have to be the smartest, we have to be the best, we have to do all of this. This has infiltrated our society so much that we don't even realize that it's there sometimes.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So that's his historical overview. Do you have any thoughts before we talk about his Assassin's Creed involvement?
I honestly am just really interested in the Assassin's Creed involvement.
So Darwin is an NPC and quest giver in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. You meet him as Jacob Fry, as you are trying to disrupt Crawford Sterrick's production of a soothing syrup, which is like a cough syrup or something like that. But it's basically making the populace more docile and malleable, which tracks with the Templars. They need the population to be able to be manipulated for their plan to work. And we see stuff like this as early as Assassin's Creed 1, in that the Templars try to like duplicate the effects of an apple of Eden without actually having the apple of Eden, through other synthetic means, like a soothing syrup or something like that. So obviously Darwin sees this as a problem, and he's like, this is hurting the poor people, like, let's stop this. And Jacob helps him do that, and ultimately Darwin assists Jacob in destroying the syrup and the assassination of its developer and things like that. Jacob then also helps Darwin by fetching fossils, and this is where Evie comes into play. And they also help him basically hunt down a newspaper that is spreading anti-Darwin propaganda, and they warn him, like, hey, like, tides are turning against you and other things. And that's really where we see Darwin. So ultimately in canon, Darwin is an assassin ally. And so as we get in there, just to spice things up a little bit, because I normally go first, I'm going to let Shelby go first on if she thinks this is accurate or not.
I do. I think this is very accurate, because I feel like Darwin's whole issue with religion and the church is kind of twofold. Like, he has an issue with the confidence of belief, of saying, yes, I believe in God, and God is exactly XYZ, and we can prove it, and the Bible says so, and all of that. I feel like Darwin is very much more of a, I'm open, I couldn't say whether or not God is this, but I think there is a higher power. And so I feel like he has issues with control, and he has issues with people telling other people what and how to believe. And so for those reasons, I just feel like there's absolutely no way he would ever side with Templars, because they're all about control. They're all about making people believe and act and exist in one certain way. And I just feel like he doesn't agree with that at all. And that doesn't even mention Darwin's preference and concern for the poor and the less fortunate of his time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I think under different Templar leadership, like if he was under Haytham Kenway's Templar maybe he could get swayed in there, because Haytham is also about like the betterment of the world and the betterment of those who like are trodden on in society. Like Haytham is about that. He's just taking the extreme of like, we have to take control to make sure that they don't get, like, the poor don't get destroyed and abused and all of that. Whereas Darwin would, I think, probably fall more in the line of, hey, let's let them fight for themselves. No, not fight for themselves, but like, let's aid them, but like ultimately we don't need to control them. We don't need to make them carbon copies of what we are. We need to help them achieve who they are.
Yeah, I hear that. I still think, though, Darwin is one of the few characters we have that I don't think he could be swayed to the Templar side no matter what.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit when I was doing this originally, but as we've gone through the episode, I've kind of leaned back on this. I thought originally he could be maybe like Tesla, where Tesla got like swayed into the Templar at first, but once he realized what they actually were, he did a hard switch and like worked against them. I could see, especially like early, I'm going to be an Anglican priest, Darwin, getting swayed in that, and then moving away from that as he like discovered his stuff like that.
Yeah.
And would explain like then why Starrick and the Templars are so like, we need to shut this guy down.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can see that.
And he just seems to have a lot of knowledge of the inner workings, especially the soothing syrup. Like he knows who makes it. He knows all of this stuff. So he might just have some stuff in there. But I do think ultimately the fact that he's such an abolitionist already leans him to assassin side anyway, but the fact that like he's so anti-racist for this time also leans to that as well. And then just like he is such a big advocate for compassion, and I think that's something that people don't realize when they hear about Darwin or talk about that. But like when you read his works and the things he says about society, he is such a huge advocate for compassion and kindness on our fellow like human beings, and like that is something that he advocates for all the way into the Descent of Man. Like this is big stuff for him, and so I think that's at the core of assassin ideology as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that is at the core of assassin ideology, but it the opposite is at the core of Templar ideology. Like the Templars do not care about kindness. They will do whatever it takes to succeed and to win. And so I do feel like he would just be predisposed against that.
So yeah, Ubisoft, good job, I guess.
Yeah, I like this episode, and I do think it is a shame that we have in our kind of like just societal understanding of who Darwin was is not accurate, I think, to who he really was. And it is a shame, but I think Ubisoft did a good job on portraying the real Darwin.
Yeah.
Well, as always, Austin, thank you for bringing this research. Great episode, very interesting one that I particularly enjoyed. So we'll see where we go from here. But until now, thank you for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at AC Lorecast.
If you have any lore questions or topics to unpack, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It's the best place on the internet. You can also support us financially through our Patreon. Find us on patreon.com/Assassin's Creed Lorecast. The Assassin's Creed Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Network. For more information about the Robots Radio Network, join the Discord server via the link in our episode's description.
If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, and join the Patreon. And if you enjoyed our intro and outro music, make sure you give a big thank you to Pipeman Studios. Thank you, Pipeman. Thanks again for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. And always remember, Assassins, stay in the shadows to serve the light.
Hi, welcome to 3 Count Thoughts. Let me introduce the crew real quick.
Hi, I'm Maverick Stone.
I'm Romer.
And I am Jaxus. Join us as we talk all things wrestling. Each week, we'll take a topic from the wrestling world, knock it around a bit, and then go over the week in wrestling from a strictly fan perspective. We can be found on all major podcast catchers. We can also be found at 3 Count Thoughts on both YouTube and Twitter. Or you can send us an email using 3countthoughts@gmail.com. Okay, are you ready? Ring the bell.